The world often misjudges people by what they wear, the way they walk, or the stories whispered behind their backs. A leather jacket becomes a symbol of rebellion, a motorcycle a roar of defiance. But sometimes, the ones who look the roughest carry the softest hearts. Sometimes, the ones branded as outlaws are the first to stand for justice when others turn away. On the outskirts of Weldon City, under the hard glare of the sun, a young mother and her daughter learned that kindness can come wrapped in tattoos, thunder, and steel. That it began with pain. The kind that leaves bruises not just on skin, but on dignity. A factory floor, a broken doll, and a silence too heavy for a child's heart to bear. The laughter of cruel men echoed down the street, thinking they had won. But they didn't know that fate had already sent its messengers. Not angels in white, but riders in black. This is not a story about revenge. It's about redemption. It's about how compassion can roar louder than cruelty, and how true strength doesn't come from power or wealth, but from the courage to stand up when others can't. If you've ever believed that kindness can rise from the unlikeliest souls, that heroes can have scars and oil-stained hands, stay with me. Because what happened that afternoon changed not just one woman's life, but the way an entire town saw humanity. The afternoon sun glared against the metal walls of the Weldon Auto Components factory, its silver reflection almost blinding. The air smelled of smoke, grease, and exhaustion, the scent of survival. Outside the gates, a little doll lay broken on the pavement, its face smudged with dirt, one arm twisted out of place. It looked small, fragile, forgotten. Much like the woman kneeling beside it, Clara was 28, a widow whose hands had forgotten the softness of rest. Her husband had died 2 years ago in a construction accident, leaving her to raise their 6-year-old daughter, Hazel, on her own. Since then, every sunrise had been a battle. Rent, bills, groceries, survival, all balanced on minimum wage and quiet resilience. That day had started like any other. Clara had packed Hazel's lunch, tied her yellow ribbons, kissed her on the forehead, and promised, "Someday things will get better, baby." Hazel had smiled, because children always believe in promises made with love. But by noon, that promise lay shattered like the doll in the dirt. Inside the factory, Clara had found the courage to confront her supervisor, a heavy-set man named Greg Turner, whose voice always carried arrogance. She had discovered her paychecks had been shorted for months. Money missing, hours uncounted, every plea met with excuses. Today, she asked for fairness. Today, he laughed in her face. "You think you can tell me how to run my place?" Greg sneered, surrounded by 2 of his men. "You should be thanking me for letting you work here at all." I just want what I earned," Clara said softly, her voice trembling but firm. "I work hard." Hard," he barked. "You call pushing buttons and crying about your sad life hard? Get out of my sight before I make sure you never work in this town again." She didn't move. She stood there, her fingers clutching the fabric of her apron. And then he shoved her. Hard. Clara hit the floor, the sting of concrete cutting her palm. Her eyes filled with tears, but not from pain, from humiliation. That was when Hazel burst through the doorway, clutching her doll. "Leave my mommy alone," she screamed, her small voice trembling with fury. Greg's friend, a man with a cruel smirk, snatched the doll from Hazel's hand. "You mean this thing?" he said, before ripping off its arm and tossing it to the ground. The laughter that followed was the kind that makes the world colder. Then they left, leaving behind a bruised woman, a crying child, and the sound of a promise breaking. Outside, Clara tried to stand. Her cheek burned where she had been struck. Hazel knelt beside her, hugging her doll's remains tightly. "It's okay, Mommy," the little girl whispered, though she was shaking. "We can fix it." Clara smiled faintly, even through the pain. "Yes, baby, we can fix it." But fate had already decided that someone else would do the fixing that day. From down the street came a low rumble. Deep, rhythmic, powerful. The sound of engines, not one, but many. 5 bikes turned the corner, the sunlight flashing across their chrome. They were the Hell's Angels. Leather vests, scarred knuckles, mirrored glasses. The kind of men the world crossed the street to avoid. But as they slowed, their leader, a tall, broad man with silver-threaded hair and eyes like cold steel, noticed the scene before him. He cut his engine, the sudden silence heavy. He took in everything: the trembling woman, the crying child, the broken doll, the factory in the background. He didn't need to ask what happened. The truth hung in the air like smoke that he walked over, his boots crunching the gravel. Then, in a voice surprisingly gentle, he crouched before Hazel. "Hey, little one," he said softly. "Who hurt your mama?" Hazel pointed toward the factory. The man's jaw clenched. Behind him, the other bikers exchanged glances, silent, knowing that he rose to his full height, his leather vest creaking. The words *RL. Hell's Angels glimmered faintly on his back. He looked at Clara. "Stay here," he said. "Please," she whispered, panic in her eyes. "Don't." But they were already moving. Engines roared back to life, tires screamed against the asphalt, and the 5 riders thundered into the factory gates like a storm unleashed. Workers dropped their tools. Greg turned, startled, as the bikes rolled to a stop. The leader dismounted first, his expression unreadable. "You the one in charge here?" he asked quietly. Greg forced a smirk. "Yeah." "Who's asking?" The biker didn't answer. He stepped closer until they were face to face. Then, very softly, he said, "You hurt a woman and a child. That makes it my business." The room went still. No one knows exactly what happened inside that factory. Some say there were only words. Others say justice came in the form of a shattered desk and a lesson learned in silence. What everyone agrees on is this: when the bikers left, no one laughed. Outside, Hazel was holding her mother's hand when the engines returned. The leader parked beside them and reached into his vest. He pulled out a brand new doll, the same one Hazel's had been modeled after. Clean, perfect, wrapped in a small white bow. He knelt again and handed it to her. "This one doesn't break so easy," he said with a half smile. Hazel stared at it, speechless. Then she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once, stood, and took out an envelope thick with cash. He placed it in Clara's hand. "I can't take this," she said. "You can," he replied. "You've earned it 100 times over." She wanted to protest, but the look in his eyes silenced her. It wasn't pity, it was respect. Then, before mounting his bike, he looked down at Hazel again. "Keep believing your mom's promise," he said. "Things will get better." The engines roared once more, and the bikers rode away, disappearing into the sunset. The next morning, the factory never reopened. Rumors spread, management had resigned overnight. Clara received her full pay with a note attached, *paid in full and in apology. Weeks later, a knock came at Clara's door. A delivery man handed her a small box with no sender's name. Inside was a charm bracelet, a tiny silver angel wing attached, and a note written in bold, rough handwriting. "You and your little one reminded us what we ride for. Respect, loyalty, and kindness. Keep the faith. RL." Clara cried quietly, clutching the note. Hazel wore the bracelet for years, never taking it off. And whenever the faint roar of distant engines echoed through the streets, she would smile and whisper, "The angels are watching." Kindness doesn't always come in clean clothes and gentle words. Sometimes, it arrives on 2 wheels, roaring through dust and smoke, wrapped in leather but driven by heart. Because real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how fiercely you protect the ones who can't stand on their own.